So students, we have seen that how and why the colonialism had spread in by the European countries in all over the world, and what were the results or impacts of colonial expansion. Now, one of the main feature of this colonial expansion was that it had helped the uh, mother countries or the industrialists to gain more and more profits. Now, these profits they further invested into the industries. Now, this tendency gave rise to different kinds of economic theories. One of the economic theory that had prevailed during 16th and 18th centuries was mercantilism. Mercantilism or mercantile capital, this concept was first used by British economist Adam Smith. In his book Wealth of Nations, he had mentioned about the theory of mercantile capital or mercantilism. Now, it was a conservative economic theory. Conservative means very rigid and narrow, and it had no scope for expansion. It was confined to some extent. So it was the main features of the mercantile capitalism or mercantilism was that it was the the economic activities were totally controlled by the government, by the state. There was no scope for privatization. So entire economic activities had to have the approval from the state government. Then mercantilism refused the export of food grains. They allowed the export of other goods, more and more export of other goods rather than importing them from other places to their countries. But there was absolutely no scope for the export of food grains. Then the governments started to collect more and more gold and silver. It was believed that the country which had more storage of gold and silver was considered to be the richest and powerful. So this was one of the feature of the mercantile capitalism, that the governments controlled the entire economic activities of the state, and they kept on storing more and more gold and silver. Then there was the expansion of trade and commerce. That was one of the basic features of the mercantile capitalism, obviously, because the industrialists wanted more and more profit. And in order to expand the trade and commerce, it was obvious that expansion of colonies or settlement of colonies was needed. So setting up of more and more colonies was another feature of mercantilism. This theory of mercantile capitalism opposed to free trade. That means it was licensed. The trade was licensed by the government, by the state, as these all features are interrelated. The first feature, which tells that the entire economic activity were controlled by the state, that means the government, without the government's permission, there was no one to do the trade, the business freely. There was no scope for free trade in mercantilism. Now this, as it was narrow, it did not have scope for liberalism. So this theory of mercantile capitalism was severely criticized later on, and after 18th century, gradually this economic theory came to an end because there was no investment in this kind of financial system. Next, we move on to industrial capital. Now, these all come as short questions, SAQ questions. So, industrial capital, what was that? It started in 18th century, and again it was propounded by Adam Smith, and this economic theory had the new class of traders who had amassed a huge amount of wealth, and they had started to invest this wealth in the different kinds of industries in order to gain more and more profits. So this kind of capital, which was invested in the various kinds of industries to gain more and more profits, came to be known as industrial capital. Now, why did this occur? Because of the industrial revolution. Because due to the industrial revolution, there was a new class of rich capitalists in the society, and they started to gain enormous wealth, and in turn they started to invest this wealth in different kinds of industries. So this concept of industrial capital came into being during the 18th century, and this theory, the theory of capitalism started to expand with the expansion of colonialism in the latter half of the 18th century, and we will see that all these economic theories led into the colonial expansion, and which in turn ultimately resulted in the First World War. Now, um, the historians or the scholars, they basically jot down three reasons for the rise of imperialism. They are the sources of raw materials, because the search for the sources of raw material, then investment of excess capital, and markets for finished products. So the three aspects forced the European nations to expand their colonies outside Europe in entire world. The last economic theory which we come across is the finance capital. This is also more or less the industrial capital that the capitalists invested there and reinvested their profits for the further enhancement in their capital. So they had settled down in the colonies. They had settle down their industries, and so on. So this finance capital, the capitalists who invested their wealth further in the colonies, they invested their wealth in the colonies, not in their own country only. but a part of their wealth was invested in the colonies also. So this gave them the fresh opportunities for investment. This idea that they could invest the part of their uh, profit in the colonies for the either for the welfare activities or for the benefit of development of industries in the colonies. So these were the three kinds of economic theories that had resulted due to the expansion of colonies in different parts of the world. Next, we will learn how this economic theories ultimately in turn led to the expansion of colonies. By these theories, basically we will learn about Hobson and Lenin. These two scholars have given their theory, which is commonly known as Hobson-Lenin thesis. We will learn about it in the next video.